Hello there! In this video, we are going to talk about filter context in Power BI. We're going to talk about where it comes from, what it is, what things can affect it, and how to best navigate it when you are creating reports for your stakeholders. So let's get started. Alright, as you can see, I've pulled up the model view of a Power BI report I used for my last series of videos. These are the current tables that are in our model. We have a sales table, which is our fact table. We've got a categories table, which is a dimension table. And we have our date table, which is going to give us our date dimension to our model. Now, I wanted to start here because we're going to start with the definition of filter context. And filter context is the total effect of all filters being applied to your data model. So if you had a filter being applied to the categories table, that table through this relationship can filter this table. Same thing for date. It can also filter your fact table. So really, when you're thinking about filter context, you're really thinking about how you are filtering these tables within your data model. And if you're filtering one table, how that table might be filtering another table through a relationship like this one. So if we click this relationship, this is a cross-filter direction single, meaning the one side can filter the many side. So let's elaborate on that and I'll show you what I mean. If we go to our report view, and report view is really the only place that filter context is going to be felt. You're going to be able to see and feel what filter context is doing to your data from the report view. And your end users are going to be able to feel it from Power BI service when they use this report online, because they won't have your data model and your data view or table view available. They'll just be looking at your report, how you've presented it. So the filter context as you've set it up is all they're going to see or be able to navigate. So filter context is very important because it's part of how you decide to tell the story of your data. So let's look at this data we have here. We have our tables on the side. We have categories, date, and sales, and we have our columns and our measures. We have two measures under the sales table, and then we have all of our columns. Now if we come over here to this table we've created, this visual, if we click on it, we'll see we have item name, which is this column right here, and it's being pulled from the categories table right there, item name. And then we have total sales and average sale, and these are measures under the sales table. And if we click on one, average sale, we can see that it is averaging the unit selling price column of the sales table. So it's averaging this table right here, and it's averaging this column. Total sales is doing the same column, but it's summing it instead. So we have an average sale and a total sales for the unit selling price from the sales table. But then we are also aggregating those average sales and total sales by the item name from the categories table. So we're already having some selection made in our model because we have item names, but these are distinct, and we have item codes under the sales table, which is what these two tables are related on, is item code, and we're pulling item name from the categories table. So this table is already saying for every distinct item name, we're going to add up the total sales and average sale from all the rows in the sales table. Now, it's not necessarily a filter because we are still considering every single row from the sales table. We aren't filtering anything out from our data right now. All we're doing is aggregating it by these measures and by item name. So let's talk about for just a moment where filters in your filter context can come from. And there's a few different places they can come from. And those are slicers, page filters, visual filters, and measures. Now, if we come back to our report view that we have created here, we have two slicers. We have year and category. Year, if we click on it, is going to filter by the year from our date table, which is related to our sales table by the sale date and date. And our category slicer is going to filter our category names of our categories table, which is also related to our sales table by item code. So let's walk through what happens if I select a year from my year slicer right here. So if I select 2021, that is going to eliminate all the rows from the date table that don't have the year 2021, which that table can filter the sales table because it has that cross filter direction of single on it, and the date table is the one that can filter the sales table. So now I've eliminated every row from the date table that doesn't have the year 2021. That's now going to filter my sales table and also eliminate every row from the table where sale date is not 2021. And so now when this produces data, we have the item names, we have an aggregated total sales and average sale for the rows that are left after we remove everything but 2021. So now we have a filter context that is affecting our visual here. It is the year 2021, and it is eliminating every row from this table that doesn't have the year 2021, which is then in turn eliminating every row from this table where the sale date isn't 2021. And I wanted to try to do this a little more visually, so I decided to kind of draw it out to explain it a little better. So here we have my crudely drawn data model. We have our categories table, our date table, our sales table, and these relationships, which can filter the sales table based off of these tables right here. And so far what we have happening is that with our slicer, we have selected the year 2021 from our date table here, only the year 2021 from our date column in our date table, because we extracted the year with the year column. Now this is going to follow this relationship down here to the sales table, and for sale date, it is going to eliminate everything that is not 2021. So all of the rows that don't have a year of 2021 for sale date are going to be eliminated because we have selected only the rows that have 2021 from the date column up here on our date table from the year slicer that we have created. So now let's jump back to our Power BI report and come to this other slicer that has category. If we click on it, we'll notice that category name is what has been assigned to this slicer. So if we drop it down and we pick cabbage, it has now applied a new filter to our data, and it has said only item names where category name, so only item names where the category name is cabbage can be allowed into the data. So now it has eliminated everything that isn't cabbage for category name. Now, since this has a relationship to our fact table down here, our sales table, it is also going to filter all of that data, just like we did with the year. So now the categories table has been filtered to only the rows that contain cabbage as the category name. And that is, just like the date column, going to apply a filter through the relationship to the sales table as well, and it's going to say every item code. So for all of the item codes in the sales table that correspond with the item names in the categories table, if the item name doesn't have cabbage as the category name, it is going to eliminate those corresponding rows from our sales table. So now we have two filters applied to two different tables that are also filtering our main fact table. So the consequence of this is, if we jump back to our Power BI report, we now only have rows where the year is 2021 for our sale date, and rows where the item code corresponds to the cabbage category in the categories table. So now we have these three items are the only items that correspond to the cabbage category, and here is their data, their total sales and their average sales for all the rows that fall in the year 2021. And now that you can kind of see how filter context can work, you could even take it a step further. I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, copy that slicer because I like the formatting, and I'm going to remove year as the field that it's slicing, and I'm going to add sale or return. I need to change my title here to sale or return, sale/return. So sale or return. We can add another filter to it if we wanted to, and this is going to filter the sales table itself rather than filtering through the dimension tables that are related to it, if I say I only want to see returns, then it's going to eliminate everything down to the year 2021, the category cabbage, and every row that has return in it. So now only broccoli had any returns for the year 2021 in the category cabbage, and then there's the total sale and average sale of the returns. And if we said sale, then it will do the same thing, but it will filter out returns instead. So it should be pretty easy to see how filters can affect your filter context for your data, but it is a little harder sometimes, especially on the user side, to determine what filters are affecting it from page filters and visual filters. And that's because if I wanted to put a page filter on here, I would use this little window right here. I would pop it out, and I'm going to eliminate this slicer, and I'm going to set these back to all so that we can see this in action. And so here's the difference in page filters and visual filters. See how it says filters on this page, and then there's filters on all pages. So you can apply filters to every single page, which these are pages down here. You could apply filters to every single page in your report. And if users didn't know you had done that and hadn't checked in your filters pane, they wouldn't know they're already operating within a filter context that has filters already applied. So you do have to be careful and cognizant of how your filter context is shaped by these different filter mechanisms. So if I pop this back out again, filters on this page, and let's say I wanted to eliminate everything but edible mushrooms. So I'm going to select all and then eliminate edible mushrooms. So now I have a page filter. So any visual I put on this page, it doesn't matter what type of visual it is, edible mushrooms, the category, will not be present. And if there are any measures, so see like total sales sums the unit selling price of the sales table. Well, if I cut it off on the categories table and say the edible mushroom category is unavailable, then it's going to affect these measures as well. So average sale and total sales will only be summing or averaging the unit selling price for everything but edible mushrooms. So this is where you have to be careful and very cognizant of what you're doing when you mess with these page filters or visual filters. Also, if I click a visual, see how it says filters on this visual? So I can apply filters to a visual just by itself. Down here is filters on this page. So now we have a even more complex filter context. We have edible mushrooms removed. So if I try to select them from my categories, they just aren't there because they were removed from the page filters. Now let's say on the visuals, I come to average sale and I want to say average sales less than 7. I'm going to apply a filter. So now I have a filter on this visual that's eliminating every average sale that's over 7. I have a page filter that is eliminating edible mushrooms as a category from all of the data we're viewing. And then I could even start to filter with my slicers down even further if I wanted to. So you can see how the filter context can get complex very quickly because just on this visual alone now we have a year filter coming from our date table from the year column. We have a average sale filter that's applied directly to a measure only in this visual. We have a category name filter that is eliminating edible mushrooms for this entire page. So no matter what visual or slicer we put on it, edible mushrooms will not show up. And we could even get more complex from here. So this is the care you have to take with your filter context and understanding it and how it's affecting everything, is because there are several things that can affect it, and not all of them are super visible all of the time. So now I'm going to remove my page filters, I'm going to remove my visual filter, and I'm going to remove my slicer filter up here. Now we are back to essentially unfiltered data. It's just aggregated on item name. And we're going to move on to the final thing that really affects your filter context, and that is measures. So let's look at this measure down here, total sales. So total sales is going to sum the unit selling price from the sales table. So let's change the name of this because we're going to actually sort of repurpose it. We're going to go just sales, and we're going to hit enter. So that now we are summing the sales of the unit selling price in our sales table, but we are summing it within whatever the current filter context is. So we don't necessarily want to say total sales, because if we start to change things, it isn't the grand total per se, it's total by item name, but there could be filters being applied to this that is making it not the grand total. So if we wanted to create a new measure that says total sales, and this is an extreme example, you wouldn't do this, but I want to show you what it does and how it works. We're going to use total sales, and this is where we're going to use probably the most used and most powerful function in a measure is the calculate function. So actually, I'm going to hit Shift Enter to push it down a line. We're going to go calculate, and I'm going to push Tab to have IntelliSense fill it in here. And you'll see it tells us it evaluates an expression in a context modified by filters. So the really cool thing we can do with calculate is we can ignore the current filter context, no matter what it is. So if we say, I'm going to Shift Enter again, and I'm going to say sum, I'm going to tab, and we're going to come down to sales, sales unit selling price. I'm going to tab to have it fill it in. And then we are going to put our ending parentheses there. We're going to put a comma. We're going to jump down again. So what we're telling it is we want calculate to sum. We're doing the same thing. We're summing the unit selling price in the sales table. The same thing that sales is doing, except now when we put all and hit tab and hit to come down here to the sales table and hit tab, close our parentheses, and then we're going to Shift Enter again, close our parentheses to close our calculate function here. Remember, parentheses closes the logic of whatever function you're using at the time. So now what we're telling it is I want you to sum the unit selling price of the sales table, but I want you to use the entire sales table as the data. So no matter what the current filter context is, we're going to use the entire table. Doesn't matter what other filters are being applied. So when I hit enter, we now have total sales down here. And if I take this table and I drag it over and I add total sales, look at what it's done now. Now it says I'm just going to add the total sales of the entire sales table, regardless of what filters you have on it. So even though I have somewhat of a filter context on here by saying I'm only going to aggregate by item name over here, this calculate function ignores that as well. It just says total that column regardless of any other filters or aggregations. So this is the entire sales for the entire sales column. Now let's show you a useful example of using the calculate function to ignore certain filters and still acknowledge other filters. So we're going to change, or we're going to move actually category over. I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, copy paste the year, and I'm going to change this one from year to month name instead, and I'll need to change my title over here to month, tab, and now I have a year and a month slicer for my data, and I still have my category one as well. So let's say if I was going to start looking at an individual year, so 2021 for my data, and I wanted to select a month, let's say February, and I wanted to compare February to the total for the year, then what I can do is I can have total sales right here. Now I'm going to change the name of this to be total sales, ignore month, just for now. But you would title these a little more cleanly if you were producing a finalized report, but I'm just doing this to kind of show you how it works. So total sales ignores month. So now we're going to come down here to the section of our calculate function, and we're going to put all, then we're going to come down to date, and we're going to go month name right here. We're going to hit tab, we're going to close our parentheses. So now this measure is going to ignore the month name, but keep every other filter in the context. So when we hit enter, now you'll notice, it got longer because of our name, but now you'll notice that it has the sales by our year and our month name for sales, because if we'll look at this one, it's just summing it. It doesn't use the calculate function to ignore certain filter contexts, but this one does. This one ignores month name. So what we have now is the sales is the sales for millet pepper for 2001, the month of February, whereas sales ignores month is the sum of that same calculation, but it is ignoring the month. So it is still considering 2021, but ignoring the month. So this, like down here at broccoli, there's 14,543 in sales for the month of February in 2021, but for the whole year of 2021, there's 180,704. So you can see how this becomes very useful if you're wanting to do month compared to whole year, if you're wanting to compare certain aggregations by certain filters, but then ignore others to give you a bigger total. Because what we could do now is we could come to our sales table, we could create a new measure, and what we're going to do is we're going to go percent of total. Now, again, you're going to want to name these a little more clearly, more succinct for your model, whatever you're building, but I'm just doing this for teaching purposes here. So I'm going to do some square brackets to give us our measures that we can compare against each other or do calculations on. I am going to go sales tab divided by square brackets again, total sales ignores month, and I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to select this percent of total again, and I'm going to, right here, I'm going to tell it to be a percentage. I'm going to drag my table over. Whoops, I just messed it up there. I'm going to go back up to the top. So I drag my table over. I'm going to make it a little bigger, and I'm going to add percent of total. So now we have another useful metric that, because we have a measure ignoring month, we can now compare sales to total sales and get the percent of total. So in red peppers, February was 44% of all red pepper sales. And that's pretty cool to know, because if you said, whatever these are, we sold 100% of all sales in the month of February for those items. And that's just a cool thing to be able to measure. It's useful. Let's go to May. So for May, these items, we sold 100% of them in the month of May. And you can start to build out other visuals, build out other useful analytics on measures and filter contexts like these. Now, in your measures, you also could, say we had our sales measure, we could apply a filter directly in this measure to filter out, say, returns. So if we wanted to say the sum of the unit selling price for all sales, not returns, we could apply a filter function in here that removes returns. I'll save that for a DAX video that we're going to do on basic DAX functions, but you could also apply a filter context within the measure itself. And then you might say, total sales, returns removed, or minus returns, something like that, that does tell the end user that the returns from the sales table have been removed. And sometimes you might find that you're building a data model and building a report for some stakeholders that you understand the mission that they're after and you understand what they're wanting to measure, and maybe you title things in here to be congruent with what you're trying to do for them, and that works as well. But you want to be as clear as possible on what your measures are doing and how your filter context is developed and what it's doing to the data, so that people don't get confused or you end up with inaccurate analysis. Thank you for watching. That's been my video on filter context in Power BI. If you'd like to learn more about Power BI, you can check out some of the videos in the description. I have 3 videos right now that walk you through the creation all the way to near completion of an entire Power BI report for beginners. So if you'd like to check that out, check it out in the description. You can also check out my website if you have further questions or would like some individual help with your Power BI reports. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching.